clause 7, which is support. Before we get too far into the weeds, though, I want to just review back with regard to the other videos, the other clauses that we've already gone through. If you look here, you see context of the organization for 1 through 4 that we've covered. Leadership is clause 5, 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3, and then planning is 6.1 to 6.3. 7, clause 7 is the final clause, major clause within the planning stages of the 9001 standard. So although you'll see planning in other sections from a kind of a 50,000 foot view, support is the final clause that's related to really planning ahead in terms of business support, leadership, strategy, that sort of thing, prior to getting into this operational lane that we see in clause 8. So clause 7, support, first of all, resources. The organization shall determine and provide resources needed to establish, implement, maintain for implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of the QMS. The organization shall consider the capabilities of and the constraints on existing internal resources. So what are your capabilities? How far can you go with what it is that you have internally versus what needs to be obtained from external providers? This could be contractors, this could be suppliers, subject matter experts, interns, other contractors or contingency labor, whatever. But that's one of the things that you need to do as an organization, is plan that. What resources are going to be needed? And then people, the organization, this is the first area you see people used. And in the 2015 version, you see the presence of people and human factors that you really didn't have much mention in the 2008 and earlier versions. The organization shall provide and shall determine and provide the persons necessary for the effective implementation of the QMS and for the operation and control of its processes. Okay, so that's when we start bringing in the people, and this one is infrastructure, facilities, buildings, etc. The organization shall determine, provide, and maintain infrastructure necessary for the operation of its processes and achieve conformity in order to achieve conformity of the products and services. So a note here could be infrastructure, building, utilities, equipment, hardware, software, transportation, information communication technology, etc. So keep in mind, if you have servers, computers, software, mobile, self-service, all that stuff would fit under 7.1.3. Environment for the operation of processes. This one is interesting, especially when we get to the notes. So it's saying the organization shall determine, provide, and maintain the environment necessary for the operation of its processes and to achieve conformity of product and services. So this piece really hasn't been there before, in a more holistic, what environment is necessary for the operation of processes, not just, okay, how do I make sure that the work environment is, clean or well maintained or doesn't introduce contaminants or whatever. We're not just talking about environmental issues that have an ill effect on the product or service. We're now talking about all of the QMS processes. So going back over again to this item right here. So if you have 18 processes within your management system, some of those processes include, let's say, workers that are in an office space. They're not actually out in, a production area or manufacturing area or whatever. But so how does this apply to those individuals? So some guidance that's given here is suitable environment. So that definition, that term suitable environment, can be a combination of human physical factors such as social, non-discriminatory, calm, non-confrontational, psychological, stress reducing, burnout, emotionally protective, physical, temperature, heat, humidity, light, airflow, hygiene, noise. So the idea here is if there are any environmental conditions, any environmental introductions of any elements that could adversely affect the output of a process, you need to be looking at controlling those environmental issues so you get the most out of your processes as possible. One thing I will bring up during in-class training is like, I don't know so much if it's hygiene, but I would say like, you know, the burning of popcorn in the break room. I mean, that happens a lot in a lot of places. People just put popcorn, microwave popcorn in for 3 or 4 minutes or whatever and walk away, and then it gets burnt and it sets off the fire alarm, or it's just this, it's smelly, and that's disruptive to the workplace. If something is intangible or off kind of in the periphery, like that can cause issues like not being there for a phone call from a customer or a loss of productivity. These are things you need to look at. So this is a really good addition to the standard that wasn't there before. It was, before just really focus on the work environment and not so much a holistic view. 715, this is your monitoring and measurement. So, calibration, those types of things in a much more general way. But 7151 is saying the organization shall determine and provide resources needed to ensure valid and reliable results when monitoring and measurement is used to verify conformity of products and services to their requirements. So this is generalized now because monitoring and measurement resources encapsulate human elements and human factors as well. So the organization shall ensure that the resources provided are suitable, so they can accurately monitor and measure. If you got somebody doing pass fail, something like that, that individual is suitable. They've got capable eyes and ears, that sort of thing, and are maintained to ensure their continuing fitness for their purpose. So what this requirement does is it becomes more broad to be inclusive to the service sector, but I don't like how the manufacturing world has kind of been left out here, because this is basically stripped down calibration. Calibration's been taken out, and it's made so general that it's a little bit difficult to kind of wrap your head around. But the idea is, if you have equipment, tools, measuring, monitoring devices, be it your eyeballs or an electronic digital indicator of some type, that it's suitable at giving you accurate readings, and that it's maintained, making sure that let's say you have an eye check, an eye test or something like that every year, something on rotation to make sure that your mechanism or your human resource, whatever it might be, it continues to be adequate. The organization shall retain appropriate documented information. Again, retain indicates a record. So keeping a record is evidence of the fitness for purpose of that resource. It could be calibration record, it could be an eye exam record, what have you. 715 is traceability. So when traceability is a requirement, not in all cases, is it a requirement, but when it is, it's considered by the organization to be essential for providing confidence in the validity of measurement results. Measuring equipment shall be calibrated or verified, or both, to a known standard, might be international or national. If there is no such standard, the basis for calibration verification shall be retained as a record. Just to know, what was the basis for that calibration and traceability to be tied back to how the calibration or verification status was achieved. Another piece is measurement equipment shall be identified in order to determine its status. So calibration, due for calibration, past due, so on and so forth, and then safeguard against adjustments, damage, deterioration, etc. The organization shall determine if the validity of previous measurement results have been adversely affected when measurement equipment is found to be unfit for its intended purpose. and shall take appropriate action as necessary. So you might say have a piece of equipment that's on a quarterly patient for calibration, and you find out in the next round of calibration and verification that that piece of equipment is insufficient or is giving you inaccurate results. What do you do in that case? And you may have to do some recall, you may have to go quarantine product, but take action as appropriate. 716, organizational knowledge. The organization shall determine the knowledge necessary for the operations of its processes and to achieve conformity of products and services. This knowledge shall be maintained. So that means constantly checking, maybe retraining or re-awareness, and the knowledge needs to be made available to the extent necessary. So you could have all of this training material, but if the folks that need that knowledge or need that training material or even work instructions or checklists, if they can't get to it, what good is it? When addressing changes in needs and trends, the organization shall consider its current knowledge. So what do you know currently within your organization, and determine how to acquire or access any additional knowledge, required updates. So that might be going from handwritten to digital. What happens in terms of the organizational knowledge there? Is there a gap? And if so, can we fill that gap? Some additional notes here. I'm not going to get into that, but jump into 7.3. The organization, in terms of competency, shall determine the necessary competence of persons doing work under its control. So it doesn't say employees. There might be contractors, maybe other contingency workers, but anybody that's doing work under your organization's control that affect the performance and effectiveness of the management system. You need to know what their necessary competency level needs to be. And you have to ensure that these persons are competent based on appropriate education, training, or experience. Where applicable, take action if there is a gap, and take action to acquire the necessary competency and evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. So a test, on-site demonstration of the work being done appropriately, etc. And then use the word retained again. So keep a record as evidence of the competency. 7.3, more general than competence, but the organization shall ensure that persons, again, doing work under the organization's control are aware of quality policy, relevant objectives, their contribution to the effectiveness of the QMS, including benefits of improved performance, and any implications for not conforming with the QMS requirements. What could happen if I don't effectively do my job in the correct process steps or what have you. 7.4, communication. The organization shall determine internal and external communication that's relevant to the QMS, including on what the organization will communicate, when, with whom, how to communicate, and who communicates. So this was an aspect that's been in the environmental management system for a while now, but now it's coming into play in quality as well. So just kind of the rules for how you're going to communicate internally and externally. And we get to 7.5. So this is a clause, the last clause here in clause 7 for documented information. So your QMS shall include any documented information required by the standard and any documented information that's determined by the organization as necessary. So this here is basically saying, all right, you got to have your scope, you have to have your quality policy, you have to have your quality objectives documented, but any other information, any other documentation that you think is needed to effectively run and manage your QMS. So that's kind of the 4 spots where you see mention of maintain documented information, but this is really talking about those types of documents and records. Okay, so this section is a little bit more little bit broader than it was in the past in the 2008 version. It's saying creating and updating. Okay, within your document control system or whatever, what about creating and updating document information? So the organization shall ensure appropriate identification and description, like a title, etc., format, language, software version, and media, paper or electronic, and then review and approve for suitability and adequacy. So some organizations will have like an auditing protocol every year. If the document hasn't been updated, it comes up for review just to make sure that it stays up to date and has pertinent information. Control of documented information. So document information required by the QMS and by this standard shall be controlled to ensure that it's available and it's suitable for use where and when it's needed, and it's adequately protected. So against loss of confidentiality, improper use, loss of integrity, etc. For the control of document information, the organization shall address the following activities. So how is the documented information, be it a record or a checklist or standard work or work instruction? How's it distributed, accessed, and retrieved and used? How's it stored and preserved, including preservation of legibility? How is that document controlled to make sure that changes are apparent, like revision or version control? And then your process for retention and disposal or getting rid of that documented information. So external documents that are necessary shall be identified as appropriate and also be controlled. Documented information retained as evidence, so that would be records of conformity, shall be protected from unintended alterations. Okay, so that's your quick blitz through clause 7.